And now it's time to consider the path of your feet, for crying out loud.
Today, we're grappling with the question of how can God and suffering exist at the same time? And it's very timely. We decided very intentionally to talk about this while we talk about parenting, because I think you'll see a lot of similarities there. But I don't want to spoil it too much. Let's get into the video, and then we'll talk about it after.
Problem of suffering,
Yes,
and the
yes.
problem of evil.
Exactly. That's so true. And you learn that God is all powerful and all loving. And I'm like, well, that's not possible, because if he's all powerful, he certainly is not all loving, because there's a lot of stuff he could be stopping or changing. And if he's all loving, there's no way he's all powerful, because he would stop those things. So I'm like, this just cannot be.
If you believe in
Okay, so we'll stop it there. What are some of your initial reactions when you see that?
Well, shoot, I feel like the 8th grade called and it wants its argument back, like it was just exhausting. The idea that you can't be all loving and allow suffering, like you miss the entire ideology or theology behind the plan of salvation. Right? Like, you came here to have a full mortal experience, and that requires having pain and suffering. And right. Why can't you benefit from pain and suffering? Right? If you're an eternal being that's going to live after this mortal life, then one could say that it's not as bad when you suffer and die here on earth, right? Because you're going to return to live with your Heavenly Father and take what you learned in that experience to build yourself up, right? Did they miss like the whole era of Stoicism, or like, just like
this is the way. Yeah.
Humanity's built upon thriving under pressure, right? Thriving under suffering and transcending that. Like, all religions are built upon that to some degree. So I don't understand what bus they missed where they can't seem to get past this silly argument.
The thing is, this is why we spoke about gentle parenting on the same episode as this, because I feel like it really drives home that point. So gentle parenting is the kind of God that they want. They want a God who takes away all the owies and gives them all the kisses and butterfly tickles that they could ever want, And so where does that lead? If we take that horse out of the barn, let's ride it for a little bit, see where it takes us. I'm feeling a little spunky today. So let me illustrate by a couple of examples. So the other week, I had my son's 8th birthday party. And we're like, we're going to invite your friends, bring them all over. We're going to take them to the trampoline park. Chanel was staying at home with our youngest. And so she's like, all right, you're going to be taking them. I was like, okay. All right, boys, let's go. So he took all of his friends. We get in the minivan. We drive down to this trampoline park. And before we even get to the trampoline park, so I got a call from one of their mothers. And the mom was like, hey, this is Texas, keep going. Okay. She was like, hey, so just in case Brandon gives you some trouble, I just wanted to give you a couple of heads up. And I was like, okay, what's going on? She was just like, so just keep in mind that he has some ADHD, so he may need just a couple of gentle reminders. It's not that he's not paying attention to you. It's just that he just has a hard time paying attention like the rest of us. And she was like, also keep in mind that he can't drink water. And I was just like, what kind of medical condition is this? This is like one of the rarest kids in the world. She was like, he'll drink juice, he'll drink Powerade, he'll drink soda, but he will not drink water. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, it's just he gags every time that he drinks water, so he drinks juice. And don't worry about if it's full concentrate, half concentrate, he'll take any of it, but just try and stay away from the water if you can. And I was just like, you mean that liquid that humans have been drinking since they were created?
The dawn of time.
That one. And so, some context. This lady, she works, her husband work, they have a full-time nanny at home, they both work for big oil companies, they are very, very, very well off. And the way that they've parented their child is exactly the kind of parenting model that these guys expect from God, where it's like, hey, anytime these people are uncomfortable or express discomfort, it means that I have failed to show some form of love. And as a parent, I have failed at some level. And so then they immediately start working to build a workaround so that they start working around the child. So this ideology leads to parents wrapping their kids in bubble wrap, giving them the helmet, the wrist pads, the knee pads, and then the training wheels, and then the parent still steering the bike and pedaling it at the same time, and then whispering in the kid's ear the whole time like, oh, aren't you having fun? Ooh, this is great, huh? And then the kid just sitting there just like, yeah, this is fun, thanks. But they're not teaching the kid. It doesn't make the kid into anything.
No.
All they are really teaching the kid is that they are not stronger than the problems that are in front of them. So the problem of, some might not even consider this a problem, the problem of drinking water, okay?
Well, and like, to your point there.
This is teaching them that they are strong enough to be able to drink water. Okay, there was another kid, also an only child, who was at this trampoline park. Within 5 minutes, he comes up to me, and he's like, hey, Hayden. He called me by my first name, which is kind of a little jarring to me still. Like, I still can't call our uncles and aunts anything but uncle, insert first name here, or aunt, insert first name here. So he's like, hey, Hayden, I finished everything here. What else can I do? And I'm like, we booked this place for like 3 hours, kid. I was like, go play. He was like, well, I already did everything. And I was like, use your imagination and play. And so he was just like, oh, fine. And then he just kind of goes on his way and starts playing with his friends, just begrudgingly. And then every 10 minutes after that, he just kept coming up to me. He was like, can I play at the arcade? Can I go get an icy? Can I go get some Slurpee? And I was just like, dude, what happened? Why has society fallen so hard? Like, it used to be that like a trampoline park was something that kids looked forward to, that this was fun in itself.
All day. Yeah.
But now it's like, I'm bored. I did it for 2 seconds, and usually if I cry at home, my mom will give me exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know that was a long rant. I'll let you give your 2 cents on this.
Yeah, I think that. So first of all, in your story, like the phrase "he can't drink water." With my boys and I, we're memorizing a poem right now called "Can't" by Edgar Albert Guest. So whenever I hear the word "can't," I say "can't is the," and all the kids respond, "worst word ever written or spoken." Doing more harm here than slander or lies. Mm-hmm. It's like they go through into the poem because like the whole idea behind the poem is that like that word "can't" is the most disabling word. As soon as you say that, you believe it, and then you actually can't do anything, right? So like he can't drink water. No, he can. That's how he's alive, is by drinking water. Unless he's in some hospital room with like an iron lung kind of a device that's keeping him alive without water, he can do it. It's going to be okay.
Well,
right?
Now there's
enabling
actually
that idea.
Some scientific research behind that. Some people have, they've hooked up patients before to, like the on Stranger Things, how Eleven has that like net of like wires that she puts on her head, where you can kind of see how your brain responds to kind of different questions and things like that. So they have studied people, they give them this difficult problem, and then they introduce a couple of words. And when they ask the person to think about the word can't, they've noticed that all brain function pretty much shuts down. Everything just goes black on the map. But if you introduce the word how, everything lights up and the brain starts working, neurons start firing, everything starts trying to figure out how to solve that problem with the current resources that they have. So totally agree with what you were saying. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. So I think that, it goes right along with this whole like idea behind God. If he's loving, he won't let you suffer, right? And people saying, well, I can't do the things God wants me to do. So God hates me because he's not letting me not do those things, Like, I don't want to suffer. I can't feel happy when I'm suffering. So why is God making me suffer? It's like, first of all, I think God is a lot more hands-off in regards to your suffering in your life than you think until you call him into your life, right? Like, until you bring him into your life, he's going to let you play this out, the simulation, which is the plan of salvation, to the fullest extent, right? You're going to have your mortal experience. It's yours. You have agency. Like God is not punishing you every time you stub your toe or step on a Lego. That's on you.
Yeah.
You didn't get your kid to clean up your Legos. That's another
Yeah.
permissive parenting problem. But I think that when people see this whole like, well, if he allows suffering, he must be evil. It's like, no, I can't even like address it appropriately because they're honing in on such a specific point while disregarding so much of who God is. It's like, we can't talk about this little thing here. It's like trying to discuss the specific shading on a painting with a blind person. They're going to argue with you. They can't even see the big picture. They can't. So yeah, there's not much to say to people who say stuff like that.
Well, let me give an Elder Maxwell quote. I know we love those in the church, so here's one.
Oh yeah, there
it
you
says, "Therefore, how can you and I really expect to glide naively through life as if to say, Lord, give me experience, but not grief, not sorrow, not pain, not opposition, not betrayal, and certainly not to be forsaken. Keep from me, Lord, all those experiences which made thee what thou art. Then let me come and dwell with thee and fully share thy joy." So it's folly that the idea to think like, oh, I can progress and not experience any kind of pain or opposition or any kind of pushback to that. I mean, any athlete can tell you they put in a lot of reps, they put in suffering to get to where they're at. Any Olympic level athlete can double that. They're like, yeah, there is a lot of suffering when involved in progression. And if we are trying to progress to the level of becoming like God, then we're going to have to go through a lot of suffering, and we're going to have to be tested. And this is a testing ground for us. That's all mortality is. It's a testing ground for us to say, okay, are we going to be faithful to the principles that we've been taught, to that light of Christ that's within us? Or are we going to choose the path of least resistance? Are we going to start credit card parenting or credit card living our life and just taking the easy way out anytime we're confronted with this? Or are we going to stick with it and grow and develop muscles and learn things and become someone? Anyone who's tried playing the piano learns that lesson. Like, yeah, if you try and play the piano, you can't expect to be this grand master from day one. You have to learn all of the notes one by one, and then you have to learn how to work your fingers so that they hit the notes at the right time, and then eventually you have to learn how it all flows together, and you get more and more complicated pieces from there, and then you grow into that state of being a grandmaster. And it's something that takes intentional hard work. Speaking of this country, one of the greatest countries that has ever been in the entire world is the United States of America, right? This country wasn't always what we see today. That might shock some people, but we got here through a lot of hard work and a lot of suffering. So there's this great American radio broadcaster named Paul Harvey, and he has this amazing speech. Highly recommend watching it, but there are some snippets that I want to read out of it, okay? He says, "This was wasteland when God had it to himself. He handed man a hoe and said, 'You want another Eden? All right, earn it. And all that's necessary for the weeds to take over again is for you and me to lay down that hoe.' Now, Americans, the problem is less acute today than it has been. We're on the right track now, but if we sit down on that track, I'm afraid we're going to get run over. We tell our young people how our country was carved out of the wilderness. No, it wasn't. Our nation was not carved out of the wilderness. Our nation was hammered and hoed and chopped and dug and sawed and clawed out of the wilderness by bare-handed men who asked nothing for nothing. America did not start off with an agricultural production that's the awe and envy of the world. It was seeded first by sod-busting farmers who fought Indians and ranchers and cold and heat and drought and bugs and flood and one another. The fruited plains sprang forth from barren acres only after they had been watered with a lot of sweat. I guess that what I'm saying is that the more history I study, ours and others, the more certain I am that there is one fertilizer essential to the survival of civilization, and that fertilizer is sweat. And I don't mean perspiration. I mean the kind of steamy, streamy, salty sweat that's run from a man by hard physical work. Somehow that sweat gets into the soil or farm or a factory or a city or a state or a nation, and everything thereabouts grows tall and strong and tough enough to stand against any storm. But the day the sweat dries up, the soil dries up, and whole civilizations are buried in dust." So, well said.
That's a good one.
Really good words
really
from
well
Paul Harvey. Definitely check out the video there, but I couldn't agree more. the idea here is that suffering is a part of this experience, the mortal experience. And it's the key to greatness in any pursuit, whether you're trying to learn a new skill, whether you're trying to be a parent, whether you're trying to just be a kid going through, like, just trying to get through school. You're going to have to put in hard work to get any degree of satisfaction or joy out of life. We also are subject to the law of opposition. So if we feel sorrow, it expands our capacity to also feel joy. If we did not have sorrow, we would not be able to experience joy in mortality. Oh, yeah. And that's something that is not really talked about a whole lot these days. But joy and sorrow, they both go together. You can't have one without the other. And happiness, misery, sweat, determination, discipline, all of these things, they work together and they help you to become more than you are. And for that reason, we call these people to consider the path of their feet, because if you give that advice to everyone and say life should be easy, life should be nothing but rainbows and puppies and tiger kisses, then what you're going to get is a handful of entitled kids that believe that if life is difficult, they've done something wrong and that someone else needs to come in and make it right for them. And it turns them away from going to the enabling power of the atonement and saying, please make me strong enough to handle the mountain in front of me and help me to move it. And so that is a destructive ideology. It can destroy families, it can destroy people, it can destroy entire civilizations. And so for that reason, we call these people to consider the path of their feet. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I think just last point is that the easiest way to understand how God could allow suffering into your life and still love you is to become a parent yourself. At that point, you just naturally understand this paradox, this seeming, paradox, that when you are teaching your son or daughter to be something more than they are, to grow in, there are growing pains, and you can't forfeit the growth because of the growing pains, right? So as soon as you have children and you're raising them righteously, you'll see that there's no way around suffering, right? But there's still love throughout that entire process. So I think these people should have more kids and they should raise them right. I think that's the whole theme of this episode.